The first thing I heard that Christmas night wasn't the crackling of the fireplace or the soft hum of carols on the radio. It was my mother's sigh, long and dramatic enough to sink into the branches of the tree I was decorating. "She's still job hunting." Again, she murmured loud enough for the entire living room to hear. My father nodded like a judge agreeing with the verdict. "She just can't keep steady work," he added as he carved the ham with the solemnity of a man discussing national policy, not his own daughter's life. And then came the soft click of heels across the hardwood floor. My younger sister Lauren swirling her wine as she gave me a smile that wasn't quite a smile. "Some things never change," she said, watching me hang an ornament as though I were a child who hadn't learned how to grow up properly. And for a moment, everything, the blinking lights, the scent of pine, the hush of Vermont snowfall outside, felt exactly like every Christmas before it. Until the television volume surged behind me and a reporter's voice cut through the room. Coming up next. Breaking news. Mystery tech founder revealed as a local woman. The ornament slipped from my fingers. I bent down to pick it up, feeling all three of their gazes pressing into my back. The glass bulb was one Lauren and I had painted as kids. Hers was perfectly even mine, streaked with messy glitter. Somehow it felt symbolic tonight. I set it carefully on a branch, pretending my hands were steady. Mom shuffled in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a festive towel dotted with snowmen. "Emily, sweetie, would you put that higher? It looks a little childish down there." She had always believed the tall branches belonged to Lauren, the grown-up daughter. Lauren adjusted her wine glass and leaned closer to Dad. "She's probably between jobs again," she whispered, not softly enough. "It happens." Dad cleared his throat. "Emily, your mother and I were thinking, new year, new start. Maybe you should consider something more stable. You're 30 now. It's time to settle." I kept my eyes on the tree. "I'm not job hunting." Dad waved this off as if brushing away dust. "Everyone needs stability. Floating isn't a plan." Mom set down a bowl of cranberry relish, her smile both soft and sharp. "We just want you to find something real, sweetheart. Something secure, not these laptop side gigs." I didn't reply. If I said I had stability, they wouldn't believe me. If I said I wasn't floating, they'd insist I was. If I said I was fine, they'd say I was in denial. Some battles weren't worth engaging in. The TV continued murmuring in the background, but no one paid attention. Lauren reached for an ornament I had placed near the top and moved it 2 branches lower, a correction disguised as helpfulness. "Symmetry matters," she said lightly, like she hadn't just reasserted her status as the daughter who knew best. Outside, children shouted as they threw snowballs down the street. Inside, the Carter house felt like a stage set. Everything familiar. Everything predictable. Everything rehearsed. Thanksgiving had been the same argument, and the Christmas before that, and the one before that. The narrative had never changed. Lauren accomplished. Emily drifting. I stepped back from the tree. "Looks balanced now." Lauren smiled at her reflection in a silver ornament. "It does, doesn't it?" Dinner was almost ready, and Mom couldn't resist gathering information the way some people collected salt and pepper shakers. "Emily, honey, any plans for January interviews lined up? Something with benefits, maybe?" I gently rearranged the tree skirt. "No interviews." Lauren exhaled, shaking her head as if I were a disappointing coworker and not her own sister. "I can help redo your resume tonight," she offered. "I'm good at making things look credible." Dad raised his glass of cider. "Lauren is a perfect example of consistency. You should follow her lead." Mom beamed at Lauren with the kind of pride that could warm an entire winter. "Your sister always knows how to hold on to a job." Lauren's grin widened. "Well, someone has to be the reliable one." I didn't flinch. I'd learned long ago to swallow comments like that without letting them choke me. The doorbell rang, startling Mom. "Oh, that must be the Hendersons." She hurried away, returning moments later with our snow-dusted neighbors carrying a tin of cookies. "Merry Christmas." Mrs. Henderson gave Lauren a warm hug, then turned to me with polite curiosity. "Emily, are you still between jobs?" It was the same tone one used for a stray cat kind, but pitying. Lauren sipped her wine to hide a smile. Dad answered for me. She's figuring things out, still searching, still searching. The phrase floated through the room, attaching itself to me like invisible lint. Mrs. Henderson nodded sympathetically. Well, good luck, dear. Hard time of year to be unemployed. I kept my hands folded. Thank you. They wished us a merry holiday and left. Snow blew in as the door closed, the cold slicing through the warm lights for a moment before the house sealed itself shut again. Mom brushed imaginary crumbs from the counter. See, people understand. Plenty of folks take time to get back on their feet. We're not judging, Lauren murmured. Not much, anyway. The TV shifted programs, the announcer's voice cutting through the chatter. Healthcare technology breakthrough expected to reshape predictive medicine. I recognized those words instantly. They were the language of my world, the world no one here asked about. But before I could catch more, Lauren clicked to a holiday music channel. No tech stuff tonight, she said, smiling brightly. It's Christmas. I went to pour myself a glass of water, pausing when I saw my reflection in the kitchen's darkened window. 30 years old, a face illuminated by blinking red and green lights, a woman who'd built a life her family didn't even believe existed. It wasn't their fault they didn't know, but it wasn't entirely mine either. Mom returned to the living room just as another ornament slipped from her fingers and rolled toward my feet. Oh, your childhood one. Remember when you painted it with glitter glue? You were so creative back then. She handed it to me. You should put it back on, even if it looks a little messy. Lauren smirked from behind her wine. Messy is her specialty. I placed the ornament gently on a branch near the middle. There. Happy Mom nodded approvingly. Perfect. The doorbell rang again, another neighbor dropping off pie. This time, Dad answered the door. Merry Christmas, they said, stepping inside. Oh, we saw on the news earlier they're revealing some tech founder from Vermont tonight. A mystery woman. Imagine that. Lauren laughed loudly. Definitely not anyone in this house. I managed a small smile, though my heartbeat quickened. I had known the reveal was coming someday. I just didn't expect it to happen. Here. Mom carried a tray of stuffing toward the dining table. Come help set the table, Emily. I followed her, placing plates carefully, centering silverware. Lauren floated behind me like an echo with heels. Try not to embarrass us this year, she whispered in passing her perfume sharp and floral. I didn't reply. I never fed the fire she tried to set. When we sat down, Dad cleared his throat. Before we eat, I'd like us to be grateful for consistency, responsibility, and perseverance, qualities we can all learn from. He nodded toward Lauren. Lauren dipped her head modestly. Just doing my best. Mom patted her hand, glowing with pride. We're so lucky to have a daughter who always stays steady. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't need to. Dinner went on like a rehearsed play, compliments toward Lauren. Questions toward me that felt like instructions. Advice disguised as concern. Laughter that didn't include me. The same script every year. I didn't resent them for it. Not anymore. You can't resent someone for not seeing what they've never tried to look at. We were halfway through dessert when Dad pulled out a small envelope and slid it across the table. Emily, we know money might be tight. Just until you find something more stable. Inside was a check for $5,000. Mom added quickly, it's not charity, sweetie. It's support, just until you land on your feet. Lauren picked up her fork and twirled it thoughtfully. Maybe after New Year's you can start applying for real jobs. I heard a marketing firm downtown is hiring assistants. I laid the envelope down without opening it further. I'm fine. Dad frowned. Pride doesn't pay rent. I didn't answer. Then click. A sudden blast of sound filled the room. Everyone turned. The TV, forgotten in the corner, had switched segments. A red banner pulsed across the screen. Breaking news. Mom reached for the remote, startled. Oh, the volume! But before she could lower it, the announcer's voice boomed through the living room. Breaking news tonight. We have just confirmed the identity of the mystery tech founder behind the healthcare platform, revolutionizing hospitals nationwide. Sources say the founder is a 30-year-old woman, originally from Maple Ridge, Vermont. The room froze. The air froze. My pulse froze. Lauren's wine glass stopped mid-air. Wait. Maple Ridge Dad stared at the screen. Mom's face went pale. The anchor continued. We will reveal her name in moments. All three of them turned toward me at the exact same time. And for the first time that night I looked back. Dad was the first to speak, though his voice sounded as if it were traveling through water. Emily, did you hear that they said Maple Ridge? He looked at me the same way he used to look at bruised leftovers in the fridge, confused, cautious, trying to decide if something had gone bad without anyone noticing. Mom pressed her hand to her chest, her fingers trembling just slightly. It can't be anyone we know. Probably someone from the next town over. Someone successful. Her voice wavered on the last word. Lauren stood very still behind her chair, her face tilted toward the TV as if the right angle might change the reality forming in front of her. Do you know any tech people around here? She asked sharply, her eyes flicking between me and the flashing news banner. I held her gaze for a moment, then turned back to my glass of water. A few, I said softly. CNN's music played through the speakers like a countdown drum. The anchor continued. This unidentified founder has kept her identity hidden for years, despite leading what experts call the most groundbreaking healthcare technology of the decade. Mom let out a nervous laugh. Well, that rules out Emily. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sweetheart, you didn't even finish that online coding course your cousin recommended. Lauren raised a brow. She dropped it after the first week. Dad nodded as though this confirmed some long-held suspicion. Exactly. Couldn't be her. I looked down at my hands at the faint indentation on my ring finger from the years I spent typing 12 hours a day. It was almost tragic how perfect their narrative was, how airtight, how comfortable. Mom moved toward the remote. Let's turn this off. It's Christmas. We don't need depressing tech news. No, Lauren snapped. Leave it on. Her gaze sharpened like she just spotted the outline of a secret she didn't know existed. The anchor went on. The technology has already been adopted by major hospitals across the country, reducing ICU fatality rates by over 20%. Dad whistled. 20%. That's incredible. Lauren tilted her head. Didn't you once say you were consulting for hospitals? Emily, something about health data. Mom scoffed quickly. Baby Emily's freelance projects were small, very small. Let's not embarrass her with comparisons. I took a slow sip of water. Mom, you don't actually know what I do. She froze. The remote paused midair. Excuse me, Lauren gave a brittle laugh. Are we doing this again? The mysterious tech job? The laptop magic, Emily, please. We're trying to watch the news. The screen flickered as the anchor continued. Industry insiders say the founder built the first prototype alone, working from a small apartment before assembling a team. Many describe her as brilliant, driven, and unusually private. Dad shook his head. Sounds exhausting. Whoever she is. Mom finally lowered the remote and sat back down, gripping the armrest. Imagine the pressure. Imagine everyone counting on you. That's the job, I murmured. What was that? Lauren shot back. But before I could answer, the broadcast cut to an interview clip. A doctor in Navy scrubs stood inside a bustling ICU saying, if we'd had this technology 5 years earlier, we would have saved hundreds of additional lives. Whoever built this, they changed medicine forever. Dad leaned forward. Wow. Then, without turning his head, he asked me, do you know anything about this MedPredict? You mentioned something with predict once when you were between jobs. I felt the slightest tremor under my ribs. I mentioned it more than once, I said quietly. Lauren let out a scoff. Oh, please, she mentioned reading about it, not running it. The anchor returned on screen. We're moments away from revealing the founder's identity. What we know so far, she is 30 years old, a Vermont native, a former engineering student who left her corporate job to build MedPredict from the ground up. Dad paused. "Didn't you study engineering for a bit?" Emily's mom quickly interjected before she dropped out. "I didn't drop out," I said. "I transferred programs." Lauren waved a hand dismissively. "Same thing." The room thickened with tension, as though the Christmas tree itself was holding its breath. The blinking lights reflected red and green spots across the window, festive, gentle, utterly at odds with the dread rolling through the house. Mom stood abruptly and carried a plate of cookies to the table, her movements sharp, her voice too bright. "Let's just serve dessert." "We don't need," wait, Dad said. "They're about to say it." Lauren folded her arms, her jaw tightening. "Yeah, let's hear her name." I felt the knot tightening at the base of my throat. I should have walked out of the room. I should have warned them months ago. I should have been honest. But honesty had required belief, and belief had never been available here. I sank into the couch cushion as the anchor said, "We now have confirmation from multiple sources." The founder of MedPredict is the TV froze for a split second, buffering under the weight of national attention. Dad whispered, "Here we go." Mom pressed a hand to her mouth. Lauren stared at the screen unblinking. The image shifted, and my face appeared. A professional headshot, hair, pulled back eyes steady the MedPredict logo behind me. The anchor's voice was clear as glass. "Emily Carter." No one spoke. Not even the house. The tree lights blinked. Somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed. The world tilted. Mom's fingers slipped from her lips. "No," she whispered. That can't be right." Dad shook his head hard. "There must be another Emily Carter." Lauren moved first one step back as though she'd been pushed. "You," she breathed. "You." My pulse kicked once. I kept my voice low. "Yes." Mom stumbled forward, gripping the back of a chair. "You're the founder. The one they keep talking about on the news. The one saving lives, Emily. Why didn't you tell us?" I stared at her, unable to soften the truth. "I did tell you. You didn't listen." Lauren took another shaky step. "This is insane. You can't even keep a job for 6 months. How could you run a company, a billion-dollar company?" "I kept a job," I said calmly. "You just didn't believe it was real." The room felt suddenly too small, too bright, too full of the past, pressing into the present. CNN continued playing behind us. MedPredict has become a cornerstone of modern healthcare. Hospitals report unprecedented improvements in early detection. Founder Emily Carter is now considered one of the most influential innovators of her generation. Dad slumped heavily into a chair. My daughter is a national headline." Mom's face crumpled. "You were struggling. We saw you struggling. You were alone. Why didn't you let us help?" I laughed once, soft, hollow. "You offered to help. You offered a portfolio for interviews, a check, advice. But you never asked what I was already doing." Lauren's expression hardened. "Don't turn this into our fault." "Isn't it?" I asked gently. The news anchor spoke again. "Anonymous sources say Carter maintained secrecy to avoid media pressures and protect her team during early development. Her work is now credited with reducing mortality rates across the country." Lauren sank into the couch as if her bones had melted. "You did all that?" Dad wiped a hand across his forehead. "I told people you were lost, that you were trying to find direction." His voice broke. "But you already had one." Mom shook her head over and over like a broken metronome. "How could you hide something so big?" I took a breath that felt like glass. "I didn't hide it. I tried telling you. But you saw me as someone who needed to be fixed." The color drained from Lauren's face. "And now the world knows before we do." There was bitterness there, deep and real. From the TV came the hum of applause as the broadcast switched to a clip of me speaking at an internal conference months ago. My voice echoed softly through the living room. "The goal was never fame," my recorded self said. The goal was saving lives. Mom stared at the screen as if seeing me for the first time. "My God," she whispered. You really are her." Dad swallowed. "What does this mean for us? For our family?" Lauren cut in sharply, her voice trembling. "What do you think it means? It means the entire town is going to know we didn't believe her." I met her eyes. "I never asked you to defend me." Her eyes darkened. "But we didn't even try." For a moment, none of us moved. The tree lights blinked, the house breathed, and then Dad said the one sentence that cracked something ancient inside me. "I never thought you'd succeed like this." The words were meant to be honest, they were, but they landed like a stone. Mom whispered, "Emily, please say something." So I did. "I need fresh air." I walked toward the front door. Behind me, I heard Lauren whisper, "She's leaving." Dad murmured, "Let her go." Mom whispered, "No." We already lost her once. But I didn't stop, because Christmas had finally told the truth none of us had been brave enough to say. The cold air didn't hit me immediately. What hit first was the silence, the sudden heavy absence of the living room's breathless shock, the absence of my mother's trembling hands, the absence of Lauren's disbelief cutting through the air like glass. Outside, the snow had gathered into thick white drifts along the porch steps, softening every edge except the one sharp thought echoing inside my head they still didn't understand. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me, but it didn't latch all the way. The muffled sounds of the TV still seeped through the crack, my name being repeated. The words founder and innovation and national impact tangled with the familiar murmur of CNN. The same voice that had been ignored in this house for 30 years had been amplified to millions within minutes. And still, not one of them had asked, "Are you okay?" The snow crunched softly beneath my boots as I leaned against the porch railing. Christmas lights blinked along the gutters, tiny bursts of red and green flickering like the heartbeat I couldn't steady. Down the street, other houses glowed warm and bright, families laughing, toasting, unwrapping presents. But here in the Carter house, Christmas had become something else, entirely a mirror they had never wanted to look into. Behind me, I heard the door creak open. Lauren stepped outside, arms wrapped around herself, though she wore a thick black sweater. Her breath came out in short clouds, but her tone was still warm with disbelief, irritation, and something new, fear. "You can't just walk out like that," she said. "I'm not walking out, I'm breathing." "That's not funny, Emily." She stepped closer, careful on the icy spot near the top step. "You blindsided us." I looked at her slowly. "I blindsided you, yes." She didn't waver. "What are we supposed to do with this? The news, the neighbors, the questions everyone's going to ask, how our own sister became this national tech figure and we didn't even know." "That's not my responsibility," I said calmly. Lauren's eyes flashed. "But you made it our problem." I didn't answer right away. Snow drifted sideways as a gust of wind moved through the street. A neighbor's Christmas inflatable deflated with a pathetic whine, collapsing slowly into the yard. Lauren crossed her arms tighter. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Not even me," I tried, I said. Over and over, when she demanded. "When have you ever told us anything this big?" I looked at her, the way she stood tall, steady, polished, always ready to take the lead, always ready to correct, adjust, manage. She'd never had to ask who she was in this family. The role had been handed to her like an heirloom. When I said I was building something, I replied. When I said I was working in healthcare technology. When I said I had meetings, deadlines, investors, travel. You all heard those words, Lauren. You just didn't believe them. Lauren scoffed. "We thought you were exaggerating. You always sounded vague. Because whenever I tried to explain the specifics, one of you interrupted with career advice I didn't need." Lauren shifted her weight uneasily. "You could have pushed harder." I stared at her. Why is it always my job to push harder to be heard in my own family? She opened her mouth, then closed it. The wind carried the faint scent of pine from the yard. For a moment, she wasn't the perfectly composed Lauren, the golden daughter, the one who always had the right answer. She was just a younger sister caught between her pride and her confusion. Finally, she muttered, "Well, Mom's really upset. She's upset because people will judge her," I replied. "Not because she misjudged me." "That's unfair." "No," I said softly. "It's honest." The door behind us opened again. Dad stepped outside the warm glow of the house, framing him like a halo of misplaced comfort. He rubbed his hands together against the cold but didn't come down the steps. "Girls," he said, his voice low, "come inside." "It's freezing." Lauren moved to obey, but I shook my head. "I'll come in when I'm ready." Dad hesitated, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. "We need to talk about this," he said. "All of us." Lauren looked relieved. "Yes, we do. We need answers." I met her eyes. "You're not ready for answers." Dad frowned. "Emily, don't be dramatic." I laughed under my breath. "You think this is drama?" CNN's muffled commentary rose behind us, credited with transforming emergency care, built the system from scratch, unprecedented accuracy. Lauren's jaw tightened. "It's surreal. Honestly, it feels like a prank. Like someone used your picture by mistake." A familiar ache spread through my chest. "You really believe that I don't know what to believe?" she said helplessly. "You never told us enough to build any picture at all." Dad stepped down one stair, hands in his pockets. "Why hide something like this?" "You're successful. Don't you think we would have been proud?" I held his gaze. "No. I think you would have been skeptical. I think you would have told me to be more responsible, more realistic, more stable. I think you would have warned me not to pursue something too risky. I think you would have told me to get a normal job." Dad opened his mouth, and the guilt flashing across his face confirmed everything. He didn't have to say the words. He had already said them for years. "That's not fair," Lauren whispered. "It's the truth," I replied. A patch of snow slid off the roof and landed softly beside the porch. The three of us watched it crumble in silence. Then Lauren said, "Mom's crying." I nodded once. "She doesn't like being wrong." "She's not crying because she's wrong," Lauren snapped. "She's crying because you kept this from her." I turned toward her. And how would she have handled it if I'd told her 3 years ago? Honestly? Lauren hesitated. "Well, she would have panicked," I said for her. "She would have tried to interfere. She would have begged me to come home and find something stable. She would have asked who was giving me money, if I was safe, if I was being scammed. She wouldn't have understood." Dad rubbed his forehead. "We were worried about you." "No," I said gently. "You were worried about the version of me you believed in, not the real one." Lauren swallowed hard. "You make it sound like we're villains." I shook my head. "You're not villains. You're just fixed in your version of me. And I grew without you seeing it." Inside the house murmured with the news broadcast again. This time I heard my own voice faintly from an old internal message clip being aired. Lauren stiffened at the sound. Dad's eyes widened. Hearing me speak with confidence, with authority, with clarity, hearing the daughter he didn't recognize made something shift in him. "Emily," he said slowly, "you sound different." That I replied is what I sound like when I'm not being interrupted or dismissed. The porch light flickered slightly in the cold breeze. Lauren's shoulders slumped. Dad sighed deeply. "Your mother and I? We may have made some assumptions." "That I was failing," I said. He winced. "That you were struggling. That you needed guidance." "What I needed," I said, "was respect." Lauren flinched as if I'd slapped her. Dad lowered himself onto the porch swing, exhaling as if the chair itself was carrying the weight of the realization settling into him. "We didn't know," he murmured. "I know," I said. "You didn't ask." Lauren wrapped her arms tighter around her ribs. "So what happens now? Now that the whole world knows, a gust of wind pushed snow against the railing." I looked out at the quiet Vermont street, once a symbol of where I'd come from now, the place where the old version of myself had finally been stripped away. "What happens now," I said, "is that all of you have to decide if you want to know me, the real me." Dad looked up, eyes softer. "We do." Lauren nodded slowly. I do too. But you have to let us. I studied her face. For the first time that evening, she didn't seem angry or smug or superior. She looked scared, lost, as if she'd just realized the role she'd perfected her entire life had been dismantled in one broadcast. I'll let you know me, I said softly. But not tonight. Tonight everything is too raw. Lauren let out a shaky breath. Okay. Behind us, through the cracked door, the TV anchor said, "Experts predict this breakthrough will shape the future of American healthcare for decades." Dad whispered, "My daughter did that." I turned toward the snow-covered street again, but my voice was steady now. "Yes," I said. "She did." And for the first time in my life, neither of them corrected me. The door finally drifted open behind me, letting out a warm spill of light, and voices, CNN still replaying its loop, the house breathing uneasily around the shock of my name. I stepped back inside, brushing snow from my sleeves. Dad and Lauren followed, both silent in a way that felt unnatural for our usually opinionated family. Mom stood in the middle of the living room, stiff as though she'd been holding her breath the entire time I'd been outside. On the TV, the anchor spoke with polished gravity. MedPredict, the healthcare AI platform credited with reducing ICU mortality nationwide, has fundamentally transformed the way hospitals handle emergent care. Its founder recently revealed as Emily Carter is considered one of the most private innovators in recent memory. Mom blinked at the screen, then at me, then back to the screen again. It was as though she was trying to reconcile two different universes and failing at both. The anchor continued. Reports confirm the founder is 30 years old, originally from Maple Ridge, Vermont. Lauren exhaled sharply, as if that detail alone had been the final nail in disbelief. "There really aren't that many of us from here," she muttered. Mom moved closer to the TV, hand raised slightly as if she might touch the glass. "That picture?" Her voice trembled. "Emily, that's you. They're talking about you." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The TV cut to a graphic showing national hospital adoption rates, the map glowing with blue. Over 400 hospitals nationwide, the anchor reported. Medical centers from Boston to Phoenix confirm unprecedented accuracy in early detection. Dad's brows knitted. 400 hospitals. Using your system. Yes. He sat down slowly, as if lowering himself into a new reality his body wasn't prepared for. The TV switched segments. A clip from a hospital ICU played machines beeping, nurses moving quickly, and attending physicians speaking to a reporter. "Before MedPredict, we often made decisions based on instinct and experience," the doctor said. "Now we have real-time predictive models that catch complications hours, sometimes days earlier. It saves lives. Every day." Mom pressed her fingers to her lips. "My God." Lauren let out a short, humorless laugh. "We thought she couldn't keep a job," she said under her breath. Dad shot her a look, but the damage was already hanging in the air. The anchor spoke again, this time in a tone of controlled astonishment. According to internal reports, MedPredict's founder retained 72% ownership of the company, which currently values the firm at just over $2.6 billion. Mom swayed a little, catching herself on the arm of the couch. 72%, she whispered. That can't be right." Lauren stared at me, mouth slightly open. "Are you a billionaire?" I didn't blink. "On paper." She clutched the back of a dining chair as if the floor had suddenly tilted. "We gave you a $5,000 check." Dad groaned softly, burying his face in both hands. "God help me." The anchor wasn't finished. Carter's groundbreaking work has been compared to the early days of genomic sequencing and robotic surgery. Some experts believe her influence on healthcare may define the next generation of medical innovation. Mom backed up a little, almost tripping over the coffee table. "Why would you hide this?" Her voice cracked. "Why wouldn't you tell us? How could you carry something like this alone?" I looked at her calmly. "I wasn't hiding it. I was living it." "That's not an answer," she snapped, her voice sharp with panic. "It's the only answer," I replied. The TV transitioned to an interview clip with a data science professor from Stanford. Emily Carter's algorithm is arguably the most significant predictive model developed outside a federal institution in the last decade. Her approach to data architecture is both elegant and aggressively efficient. Lauren blinked. Aggressively efficient. She looked at me as if seeing someone else entirely. You, I tilted my head. Yes, me. She leaned back against the wall, lost. Dad finally looked up, his voice weary. Emily, I told the Hendersons you were between jobs. I nodded once. You told everyone that. He winced. Because I thought you were. A clip from an internal MedPredict meeting appeared my face on a giant screen, speaking to a room of engineers, analysts, and medical advisors. My voice resonated confidently through the living room speakers. Our priority is saving lives. Everything else is a distraction. Mom stared at the screen with an expression I couldn't name. Awe, confusion, hurt, pride, fear. All colliding at once. That's really you, she whispered. You speak like someone important, Dad murmured. She speaks like someone who knows exactly what she's doing. The anchor continued. Despite her anonymity, those who have worked with Carter describe her as focused, collaborative, and fiercely protective of her team. Lauren shut her eyes. This is unbelievable. I folded my arms. It shouldn't be. What's that supposed to mean? She demanded. That it wasn't unbelievable, I said softly. You just didn't want to believe it. Lauren stiffened. That is, the TV interrupted. Sources say Carter turned down an $800 million acquisition offer last year, opting instead to maintain control of the technology to ensure its mission remained altruistic. Dad's eyes widened. You turned down $800 million? Yes. He sank lower into the couch. I once argued with the bank over a $12 overdraft fee. Lauren put a hand to her forehead. I bragged last Christmas about my $10,000 year-end bonus. 10,000. And I was proud of you, I said sincerely. Lauren looked at me as if unsure how to absorb that. Mom finally broke. Emily, how could you let us sit here thinking you were struggling? How could you let us worry? My voice was steady. Because when I tried telling you I wasn't struggling, none of you believed me. Mom flinched as though I had struck her. Lauren frowned angrily. We believed what we saw. No, I said. You believed what you expected. Dad rubbed his jaw. Emily, you have to understand. This is a lot. I know, I said. It was a lot for me too. Mom's eyes brimmed with tears. All these years I thought you were lost. That you were floating. That you needed direction. What I needed, I said quietly, was support. She blinked hard. We supported you. No, I corrected gently. You tried to guide me into being someone you understood. That's not support. That's control. Dad inhaled sharply, but he didn't disagree. The TV shifted again, now showing MedPredict's Boston office. Engineers collaborating around bright screens, analysts reviewing data streams, medical advisors working alongside them. A caption read, "One of the fastest-growing healthcare teams in the country." Lauren stared at the screen. This is your company. Yes, you built all that with a team, I said. But the architecture, the first prototype, the early models, those were me. She shook her head. I spent years thinking you were irresponsible. I know, I said. You made that clear. Mom reached for me before quickly pulling her hand back, unsure if she was allowed. Emily, honey, we just didn't understand. That's the point, I said, my voice softening. You didn't want to. The room fell silent. A final clip played on CNN, a healthcare administrator speaking to a reporter. Without MedPredict, our ICU would look very different. Families would have lost loved ones we were able to protect. Emily Carter's impact cannot be overstated. Mom pressed trembling fingers to her lips, tears sliding over her knuckles. People are alive because of you, she whispered. All this time. You were doing something extraordinary and we thought you were wasting your life. I let out a slow breath. Yes. Lauren took a single step toward me, her voice cracking. Emily. We didn't know. We didn't even try to know, Dad added softly. We were wrong. From the TV came a final statement, one the anchor read with quiet weight. This revelation has stunned the nation, bringing unexpected attention to Maple Ridge. Residents are processing the news that one of the most influential healthcare innovators of the decade grew up right here. Dad stood restless, overwhelmed. Reporters will come, he said. Neighbors will talk. Everyone will know we didn't. He broke off, unable to finish. Mom wiped her eyes. Everyone will know you didn't fail, she whispered. My throat tightened. I never failed, I said. You just assumed I did. Lauren's shoulders slumped. So what happens now? I looked around the room at the tree, the lights, the faces I'd known my whole life now seeing me through a foreign lens. Now, I said, we decide whether we can talk honestly for the first time in 30 years. And with the weight of 3 decades hanging in the air, none of them disagreed. Dad sat down heavily, elbows on his knees, as if the living room had tilted, and he needed something solid to hold on to. The Christmas tree lights flickered across his face, casting shifting patches of green and red that made him look older than he had an hour ago. Lauren hovered by the window, arms folded tight, her expression caught between defiance and disbelief. Mom stood in the center of the room, wringing the hem of her sweater until the knit stretched out of shape. Silence took a seat with us, thick and uninvited. I remained by the doorway, not fully inside the room, not fully out, exactly where I'd lived in this family for most of my life. CNN continued playing my name, repeated in a loop that felt surreal even to me. Dad finally spoke. We need to understand this. His voice was low, gravelly. All of it. Because right now, I don't even know what's real. Mom nodded, breath unsteady. Yes. How did we miss this? How did we not know? She looked at me as though I had gone missing years ago and returned as someone unrecognizable. Lauren crossed her arms tighter. I want to hear her say it, she said sharply, from her own mouth. Not from TV, not from some reporter. I want to hear it from her. I met her eyes and said nothing. Dad gestured toward the couch. Come sit down, Emily. Please. I hesitated, then stepped forward, choosing a single cushion on the far end of the sofa. The house felt different now, the way a familiar melody sounds different once you finally hear the harmony underneath. CNN showed a graphic of my company's growth curve, rising in sharp angles that had taken years of long nights and quiet victories to build. Mom flinched every time the screen flashed my name. Dad took a shaky breath. Emily, this company, MedPredict. You run it, yes? You're the lead, the founder, I said gently. He stared. You, yes. He scrubbed a hand down his face, muttering, My God. Lauren paced a short line near the window. So, all those times you said you were busy with the team or working on predictive models, you weren't just making it sound more important than it was. I looked at her steadily. No. And when you said hospitals relied on you, you weren't exaggerating. Noam Lauren's laugh came out thin and fractured. I thought you were just using big words to make your freelance stuff sound impressive. Mom shot her a warning glance, but Lauren ignored it. Emily, what exactly? Dad faltered. What exactly does MedPredict do? CNN answered before I could. On screen, an ICU physician explained MedPredict evaluates real-time patient data to detect complications before they become life-threatening. It has saved thousands of lives. Dad's head dropped into his hands. Thousands, Mom whispered. Sweetheart. You saved people. She took a tentative step toward me. You did this. I let out a quiet breath. I didn't do it alone. But I built the foundation. Lauren's expression hardened again. Then, why? Her voice cracked. She swallowed, steadied herself. Why didn't you tell us? Why keep us out? I looked at her, feeling the familiar ache return, the one that had built itself inside me for decades. Because when I tried to tell you, you cut me off. You corrected me. You gave advice instead of listening. Mom shook her head, horrified. That's not true. We listened. No, I said softly. You heard. Hearing isn't the same as listening. Lauren's mouth opened, then shut. Her arms hung limply by her sides. CNN continued its relentless narration. Carter's early work was rejected by investors who underestimated her abilities. She persisted, developing prototypes on her own before assembling her first team. Dad whispered, "Rejected by who? Everyone," I said. At first. Mom looked stricken. "And you didn't tell us you were struggling." "You wouldn't have understood," I replied. "And I couldn't afford your doubt on top of everyone else's." Mom's breath hitched. "Doubt? We never doubted you." I held her gaze. "You doubted me every time you told me to be more like Lauren." Lauren flinched as though I'd hit her. Dad opened his mouth to protest, but closed it again, slowly, guilt settling like dust across his features. CNN shifted to another segment. A healthcare analyst explained, "The founder's anonymity has been puzzling. She avoided conferences, interviews, and public recognition. Colleagues describe her as intensely private." Mom whispered, "Private? We thought you were hiding because you were failing. I was hiding because I was building." Dad exhaled sharply through his nose. "You should have told us." "I tried," I said again. Lauren stepped forward, her voice rising in volume. When did you tell us something even close to this? When I said I was leading a team. When I said we got a funding round. When I said I was meeting with hospitals. When I said the CDC reached out." My voice stayed calm, measured. "You laughed. You called it exaggeration." Lauren's face went red. We thought you were trying to feel important. I was trying to be honest," I said quietly. Mom sank into a chair. "We were so wrong." Dad nodded. "About everything." The room went still. Even the TV seemed quieter, as if acknowledging the gravity settling between us. Then CNN delivered the final blow. The impact of Carter's work is projected to extend globally. Experts predict her model will shape healthcare for decades. Mom's shoulders crumpled. "You changed the world? And we thought you were unemployed." I looked down at my hands. "I didn't need you to be proud. I needed you to believe me. And you didn't." Lauren swallowed hard. "Emily, please don't make this about us being villains. We just didn't know." I lifted my eyes to hers. "You didn't want to know." The silence that followed wrapped around us like a winter storm. Mom broke first. She stepped forward slowly, hands trembling. "Emily, please, say you forgive us." I shook my head gently. "I can't forgive something you don't understand yet." Her face fell. Dad rubbed his chest as if trying to ease a tightness there. "We deserve that." Lauren looked away, jaw-clenched, tears gathering despite her effort to hide them. CNN shifted again this time, showing my old apartment, my first office where I'd built the early models. Seeing it on screen made something inside me twist. It was strange to have the world know corners of my life my family had never cared to ask about. Lauren's voice broke the moment. "Emily, all this time I thought I was the one achieving things. Promotions, ratings, bonuses, things I thought mattered." Her breath hitched. "But compared to this, compared to you." "This isn't a competition," I said gently. She looked at me with wet eyes. "It always felt like one." Mom moved closer to Lauren, resting a hand on her arm, but Lauren brushed it off. "No, Mom, we need to hear this." She looked at me again. "Did you hate me for being the favorite?" I shook my head. "No. I hated the way our roles were decided before either of us had a chance." Lauren pressed her lips together until they whitened. Dad murmured, "We didn't realize we were doing that." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." Mom covered her face with her hands. "We thought we were protecting you." "By assuming I was weak?" I asked softly. She flinched but didn't look away. "That's what hurt," I said. "You all saw what I wasn't, but none of you ever asked who I was." Dad nodded slowly. "We're seeing it now." The TV buzzed louder suddenly, as if reclaiming the room. "Carter is expected to speak publicly within the next 24 hours, the anchor announced. Mom turned to me quickly, eyes wide. Speak publicly. What does that mean? Are you safe? What if people come here? What if I held up a hand? Mom, breathe. She swallowed and lowered her hands. Dad looked toward the front window where the curtains were slightly parted. People will show up, reporters. They might, I said. Lauren's anxiety spiked. And they'll know we didn't know anything. They'll think we were terrible. I looked directly at her. If you want people to believe you weren't terrible, then maybe start by not being terrible. Her eyes widened, then lowered. Okay, she whispered. Okay. No one spoke for a long time. Dad finally stood. Emily, we were wrong. We were small-minded. We assumed the worst, and I'm sorry. Mom nodded through tears. Me too, Lauren's voice cracked. Me 3. I exhaled a breath that felt like an entire decade leaving my lungs. Thank you, I said. But this isn't finished, not even close. Mom moved toward me, her voice soft. Then help us understand. Teach us. I shook my head gently. Understanding isn't something you wait to be taught. It's something you choose to seek. Dad nodded slowly. Then we'll choose it. Starting now. Lauren took a shaky step closer. Is it too late to fix this? I looked at all 3 of them, their trembling hope, their shame, their fear of losing me now that they finally saw me. And I told the truth. It's not too late, I said. But it won't be easy. The house exhaled with us, the Christmas lights softening to a warm glow. Outside, tires crunched over snow. Lauren turned. Who is that? More neighbors, reporters. I crossed to the window and pulled the curtain back. Headlights lined the street. People with cameras stepped out of vans. Dad's voice shook. They're here. And just like that, Christmas wasn't the only thing unraveling. The first knock sounded like a fist hitting my ribcage from the outside, loud, sharp, too certain of itself. Dad flinched. Mom gasped. Lauren froze in the hallway, halfway between running and hiding, looking like a deer that suddenly realized the forest was on fire. Another knock. Harder. Then the unmistakable rise of voices outside the front door, neighbors, curious onlookers and reporters, whose tone carried that eager brightness of people who smelled a story worth breaking. Dad hurried toward the entryway, pressing his palm flat against the door, as if he could hold the entire world back with the weight of one hand. No one opens this, he murmured. No one. But the porch light flicked on automatically, and the shapes outside sharpened into silhouettes. The glow lit up their phones' cameras and expectant faces. Snow gathered in the folds of their coats. Breath fogged the air. Feet shuffled. Someone whispered, "Is she inside?" Mom wrung her hands, pacing. This can't be happening. It's Christmas Eve. Why are they here tonight of all nights? Lauren stared through the window blinds. Because Emily's the country's biggest story right now. Her voice cracked. And because she's our sister. I watched her say it, not with pride, not yet, but with something new, something closer to recognition. Another knock. Ms. Carter, Emily Carter. We just want to comment. Cameras flashed against the frosted glass. Dad turned to me. Are they allowed to do this? They're allowed to stand on a public street, I said. And you're allowed not to open the door. Lauren inhaled a shaky breath. Some of those people are neighbors. I recognize the Coopers. And the Bennetts. Oh God, the Hendersons are here too. Mom almost whimpered. The Hendersons. Why, Lauren shot her a look. Because they watch the news, Mom. The doorbell rang insistently. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. I stepped forward. Let me handle it. Dad blocked me with one arm. Absolutely not. You're not facing them alone. They're not going away, I said. Before anyone could move again, a voice shouted from the porch. We brought a bottle of wine just to congratulate her. Mom's expression collapsed in on itself. Wine. Why would they bring wine? They never bring wine, Lauren muttered. Because our sister is apparently saving the country. Dad pressed his lips tight. Emily, get back. But it was too late. The door swung open 2 inches. Not because anyone turned the knob, because someone outside gave it a determined push, and our latch, old worn from 20 years of Vermont winters, didn't catch all the way. A gust of cold wind blasted into the living room, and with it came the Hendersons. "Oh my goodness," Mrs. Henderson exclaimed, breathless and delighted. "We just couldn't go to bed without saying congratulations." Can you imagine a billionaire living right next door? Mom's face turned the color of peppermint candy. "Please, this really isn't." But they weren't listening. Mr. Henderson stepped forward with his phone outstretched. "Could we get a quick photo? Just something to show our family. They'll never believe we know her." He angled his phone before I even answered. "Smile, Emily." I lifted a hand slightly. "Actually, tonight isn't." But the flash fired anyway. Another neighbor group appeared behind them, half tumbling through the open doorway, the Coopers carrying cookies, the Bennetts clutching both wine and homemade fudge, 2 teenagers live-streaming with breathless commentary. Guys, we're literally in the living room of the MedPredict founder right now. Lauren's mouth dropped open. "Are you kidding me? People are live-streaming our house." One of the teens waved at her. "Hi, Lauren." Mom stepped backward until she hit the armchair. This is chaos." Neighbors filled the room like rising water. Someone exclaimed, "We saw the announcement. We had no idea you were so brilliant." Another chimed in. "This whole time we thought you were in between jobs." Lauren flinched. Dad moved toward the doorway, trying to steer people back. "Folks, please, this is family time." But the Bennetts had dropped their coat on the floor. The Coopers were rearranging themselves for a group selfie, and Mrs. Henderson had taken up position beside me, beaming like a woman posing with a celebrity at Disneyland. "Emily, dear," she said, "look this way." "Yes, perfect." I raised both palms gently. "If you don't mind, I'd really prefer we not take photos tonight." "Oh, nonsense," she chirped. "You look wonderful." The flash went off again. Dad groaned. For heaven's sake. Lauren had retreated to the side of the room, eyes wide, watching her status in the neighborhood evaporate before her eyes. For years, she'd been the Coopers' favorite Carter, the one they bragged about, the one they complimented at block parties. Now they barely looked at her. One of the neighbors whispered loudly, "I always wondered why she moved away. Turns out she was doing big things." Another murmured, "Meanwhile, the sister stayed in town." Lauren's jaw tightened, ready to crack. I stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said firmly. "I'm grateful for your congratulations, but this is still my parents' home. They didn't sign up for all this." The room quieted a bit as I spoke. For the first time, I could feel the authority I used at work, steady, calm, immovable, settle into my voice here. In this house where I'd always been the smallest version of myself. "I know you're all excited, but please respect their space tonight." A few people shifted awkwardly. The Coopers mumbled apologies and stepped back toward the door. The Bennetts lowered their bottle of wine. Even the live-streaming teenagers paused long enough to say, "Oh, sorry, Miss Carter." Lauren's eyes softened in surprise. It was the first time she'd ever seen me take command of a room that wasn't a conference space. But not everyone left. Mr. Henderson lingered, inching his phone closer. "Just one more. Just for my brother." "He won't believe," Lauren snapped. "Can you not?" Her voice cut through the room like a knife. She said no. Mr. Henderson blinked. "We're just excited, sweetheart." "I'm not your sweetheart," Lauren hissed. "And this isn't a tourist attraction." Dad's eyebrows shot up. Mom pressed her lips tight to hide a proud, pained smile. Mr. Henderson finally backed out onto the porch. All right. Merry Christmas." The door closed behind them, leaving behind a trail of melting snow and rattled breaths. Dad locked the door, slowly, twice. The house fell quiet again, but not peacefully. This was the hush after a storm clears, when everyone surveys the wreckage and tries to decide what it means. Lauren turned toward me, her cheeks flushed, her voice trembling. "Why did you do that? Do what? Protect them. Protect us." She motioned toward the window where the last neighbor was leaving. "After everything we've said tonight, everything we didn't believe about you, why would you defend us?" Her voice wasn't angry. For once it wasn't competitive, it was raw. I met her eyes. Because this is my home too. She swallowed. I don't understand you. You're not supposed to understand me to respect me, I said softly. For the first time all night, she didn't have a comeback. Behind us, Mom stepped closer to the tree, touching an ornament lightly as though grounding herself. Dad sat on the edge of the couch like a man whose world had grown too big too fast. The doorbell rang again. Mom let out a small scream. No. No more. Dad didn't move. Lauren didn't move. I reached for the curtains and peeked. Outside were news vans, 3 of them engine lights humming satellite dishes pointed toward the sky. Reporters were stepping out. One pointed toward the house. Oh God, Lauren whispered. They're multiplying. Mom grabbed the edge of the tree. What do we do, Emily? What do we do? I turned toward them, feeling something inside me shift, like the moment a puzzle piece clicks into place after years of being forced where it never belonged. We don't talk to them, I said. We don't give a statement. We stay calm. Mom nodded desperately. Yes, okay, calm. Calm is good. Dad stood. Do they need to leave? Should I call the police? Should we? They're allowed to be on the sidewalk, I said, just not on our property. More voices drifted in from outside. Emily. Emily Carter. Can we speak to you for a moment? Lauren flinched again, then whispered, They really want you. I nodded steady. They want the founder of MedPredict. Dad frowned. Aren't you the same person? I smiled softly. You're asking an important question, but it's not one I can answer tonight. Mom took one step toward me, hesitation trembling in her fingers. Are you frightened? No, I said truthfully. I'm just done hiding. As if on cue, a reporter called out, Emily, we'd love to get a photo of your family. Lauren pressed both hands to her forehead. Oh God, no. Dad groaned. Absolutely not, Mom whispered. People will think we always supported you. For the first time all evening, I reached out and touched her arm. They'll think whatever narrative they want, I said, but we get to decide what's true from here on. A long breath left all 3 of them at once. Behind the door, the crowd shifted again. Dad looked toward the stairs. Girls, maybe we should move to the back of the house. Mom nodded. Yes, let's go somewhere quieter. Lauren didn't move. She just stared at me, her expression soft and bewildered. You protected us, she said again, this time barely above a whisper. I nodded once. That's what family should do. Her eyes filled suddenly, unexpectedly, and she turned away, hiding the fact that for the first time in her life, she was crying because of me rather than in spite of me. I didn't say anything. There would be time for that later. The house felt strangely hollow once the neighbors finally drifted away, leaving behind melted snow on the floorboards, and a quiet thick enough to choke on. Mom closed the curtains with trembling hands. Dad double-checked the locks. Lauren stood near the staircase, arms wrapped around herself, eyes still glossy from earlier. And I stood in the center of the living room beneath the soft, blinking lights of the tree, the same tree we'd decorated earlier that night, when everything still felt familiar, predictable, safe. Now the room felt like a confession booth. No one spoke at first. It was as though each of them hoped someone else would start. Someone else would name the thing we'd been orbiting for years without touching. Finally, Mom exhaled shakily and stepped closer to me. Emily, she whispered, I don't even know where to begin. I lifted my chin slightly. Then start anywhere. She looked desperate, unsure, hurt. I am so sorry. We didn't know you were doing something this enormous. Mom, I said evenly, you're sorry because the news said it was enormous. Not because of how you treated me before that. Her eyes widened with pain. That's not true. It is, I said softly. If I'd failed, you would have said you saw it coming. But because I succeeded suddenly, you want to know why you didn't see it. Her breath hitched. Emily, you weren't interested in seeing me, I continued. Not really. Dad cleared his throat as if the words stung him too. Your mother just wanted what was safe for you. I turned my gaze on him. Safe or small? He opened his mouth, then shut it again. The truth had always been easy to swallow in this house, but only when it was convenient. Hearing it spoken aloud raw and unpolished made all three of them look smaller somehow. Mom wrung her hands in her sweater. We doubted the world, she insisted weakly. Not you. No, I said quietly. You doubted me every time you compared me to Lauren. You doubted me when I said I was working on something important. You doubted me when I told you not to worry. She flinched like each sentence was a blow. Dad spoke next, his voice rough. We didn't think you'd succeed. Not because we didn't love you, but because your dreams felt impossible. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sting settle, letting the honesty cut where it needed to. That's what hurts, I whispered. Not that you didn't understand what I was doing, but that you didn't think I was capable of doing it. Lauren shifted her weight guilt, clouding her features. Emily, she said hesitantly, you make it sound like we were intentionally holding you back. I shook my head. Not intentionally. But sometimes unintentional wounds cut the deepest. Her lips parted, then pressed together again. I stepped closer to the fireplace, letting the warmth touch my hands. I didn't keep MedPredict a secret because I didn't trust you, I said. I kept it private because this house was never a place where I could dream out loud. Mom swallowed hard. We should have been the safe place for that. You weren't, I said simply. And pretending you were doesn't change anything. Silence bloomed again. Heavy. Necessary. Then Mom moved toward me slowly, like approaching a wild animal she wasn't sure wouldn't bolt. Why didn't you try harder to make us understand, she asked, voice barely above a whisper. How many times I replied, can you explain something to people who don't want to hear it? Dad bristled. We did want to hear. No, I said. You wanted a version of me that fit the story you'd already decided was true. Lauren looked away, ashamed. The tree lights blinked on Lauren's cheek, highlighting the tear sliding down. I didn't know you felt this way, she murmured. You didn't ask, I said. She winced. Mom took a step closer. Emily, she whispered, please, tell us how to fix this. I shook my head. You can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge. Dad let out a long, unsteady sigh. Then let us acknowledge it now. Before I could answer, I heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Lauren appeared more fully in view, wiping her face as though preparing herself for a blow. I heard everything she said quietly. Her voice sounded small, not the controlled, polished tone she used with neighbors or coworkers, not the triumphant lilt she used whenever talking about her own accomplishments. This voice was real. Fractured, bare. I need to talk to you, she said to me. Mom looked between us unsure. Should we? No, Lauren whispered. This is for me to say. She took a breath that shook her shoulders. I spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, the responsible one, the one who did everything right because I thought that's what mattered, that's what love looked like. I watched her carefully. Lauren. No, she said again, holding up a trembling hand. Let me finish. She moved closer, standing only a few feet away. When you left home, when you went off chasing whatever you were building, I didn't just think you were irresponsible. Her voice softened. I thought you abandoned me. My brows lifted. Abandoned you. She nodded. Tears filled her eyes, because suddenly I was the only one left to meet their expectations, to exceed them, to never disappoint them. And every time I succeeded, they still found a way to bring you into the conversation. I blinked. They compared you to me all the time, she said bitterly. Mom would say, if only Emily were more like you. But then turn around and tell me, maybe you should try being more imaginative like Emily. Dad would praise my promotions, but then say, Emily always had potential we just haven't seen yet. She let out a ragged breath. I wasn't the favorite. I was the replacement for a dream they had for you. I felt something shift inside me, an old resentment loosening, making room for something else, something quieter. I had no idea, I said. Of course you didn't, she replied. You were gone, building something I couldn't understand. Something they didn't understand. But I was still here trying to be everything you weren't thinking that would make me enough. She covered her face briefly, then lowered her hands. And then tonight. Everything I worked for just crumbled. Everyone was looking at you, talking about you. And I realized how small I felt. How small I've always felt. I never wanted to compete with you, I said gently. She laughed through a sob. No, you didn't. But I did, she wiped her cheeks. And I'm sorry. For every time I mocked you, for every time I dismissed you, for every time I assumed you were failing so I could feel like I was winning. My voice softened. We were both hurting. She shook her head. But you were hurting alone. And I don't know how to forgive myself for that. I stepped forward. Forgiveness isn't supposed to happen all at once. She looked at me with something like relief. Then, can we start over? I hesitated, searching her face, the sincerity, the mourning of her own past, the reaching for something better. Yes, I said finally. We can try. She nodded, tears falling again. Then her phone buzzed. A new message appeared on her lock screen, bright in the dim room. From Aunt Denise. I saw it before she could turn the phone away. What did Emily do to overshadow you this time? Lauren scrambled to hide it, but the damage was already done. I inhaled slowly. That I said quietly is why things won't heal overnight. Lauren closed her eyes, mortified. I know. That's why I want to change. Mom stepped forward, her voice gentle but strained. Girls! But I shook my head. No, this is ours. Lauren wiped her face one last time and nodded. For the first time tonight, the air felt clear, not healed, not whole, but honest. And honesty, after 30 years, felt like a beginning. Dad was the one who finally broke the fragile silence that had settled after Lauren's confession. He cleared his throat, the sound rough and uneasy, and rubbed his hands together like he was preparing to lift something heavy. Emily, he said quietly, I think we should all sit down. Mom nodded, eyes still shiny with tears. Lauren tucked her phone into her pocket as if burying her old self with it, then wiped her face and moved toward the couch. I followed them, but I didn't sit. I stood near the fireplace, arms loosely folded, letting its faint warmth reach me. Dad lowered himself into his favorite armchair, the one he always sank into after dinner, the one I used to curl up beside when I was little. Tonight he looked smaller in it, older, as if the world he'd built in his mind, the one where he understood everything about his family, had collapsed without warning. He looked up at me. Honey, there are things we need to say. Things we should have said years ago. Mom sniffed and whispered, decades ago. Lauren sat rigidly, hands clasped in her lap. Her guilt hovered around her like a second shadow. Dad took a deep breath, steadying himself. Your mother and we were raised to believe that success looked a certain way. High school, college, stable job, steady paycheck, a path with no surprises. Mom nodded weakly. A path we could understand. And when you stepped away from that path, Dad continued, we felt lost. We didn't know how to support you. So instead of asking you what you needed, we tried to pull you back to a version of life we recognized, Lauren added softly. We dragged you backward when you were already steps ahead. Dad nodded, shame tightening his expression. We thought we were helping. But we were wrong. Mom reached for Dad's hand, her voice quivering. We doubted your choices, your direction, your independence. We saw you doing something different and called it dangerous instead of brave. I didn't move. I wanted to hear all of it, every realization, every regret. Not because I needed apologies to validate my success, but because I needed them to finally see me. Dad swallowed hard. Emily, I didn't just think you were lost. I believed it. I believed it so deeply that when you said you were building something big, I thought it was wishful thinking. Mom whispered, "We thought you were trying to make your life sound better than it was." I exhaled slowly. "I know," no, Dad said firmly. "You don't know all of it." He leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees. "Your school counselor once told us you had the potential to be a visionary thinker. She said you saw things before other people did." And I laughed. I thought it was nonsense. I'm ashamed to admit that now. I felt something tighten at the base of my throat. "I laughed," he repeated, "because the idea that you could do something monumental felt too big, too unrealistic. And instead of asking how we could help you grow, we clipped your wings." Mom choked on a breath. "We made you small. We tried to make you smaller because your dreams scared us." Lauren's eyes filled again. "And I made you even smaller." I looked at her. "Lauren," she shook her head fiercely. "No, let me say it." She pressed a palm to her chest. "I wanted to be the one who made them proud. I wanted to be the success story. So every time you reached up, I pushed you back down." Her voice cracked with self-loathing. "I used you as a benchmark for failure because it made me feel safe, powerful, like I wasn't losing ground." Her honesty chilled the room. "And when you talked about your work," she continued, "I didn't hear you because I didn't want to. If your dreams were real, then what did that make my accomplishments?" I stepped closer, voice soft. "Lauren, your accomplishments matter. They always did." "But yours were changing the world," she whispered. I couldn't bear the idea that my entire identity was built on being the better daughter, when maybe I wasn't. A long silence stretched between us. Mom wiped her tears. "Girls, we did this. We created the competition. We set you up as the comparison. We shaped how you saw yourselves." Dad nodded heavily. "And we're sorry. God, we're sorry." I inhaled deeply the fireplace warmth, finally reaching into the coldest parts of me. "Thank you," I said softly. "But there's still something I need to say." They all looked at me, hopeful, frightened, waiting. "I didn't keep MedPredict private to punish you," I said. "I kept it private because I needed to know who I was without your doubts, without your expectations, without your limits." Mom bit her lip. "Didn't you want to share your victories with us?" I replied. "But you weren't listening." Dad's voice lowered to a whisper. "We hear you now." For the first time, I said gently. Lauren lowered her head. "We don't deserve your forgiveness." "No," I agreed lightly. "But forgiveness isn't something you deserve. It's something you work toward." Mom's breath trembled. "Can we work toward it?" As a family, I looked at her long and hard. "That depends on whether you want to know the real me or the version of me that fits your comfort." Her lips parted, trembling. "The real you," she whispered immediately. Dad echoed, "The real you." Lauren's voice was softer. "The real you. Always." The moment felt fragile, like a glass ornament balanced on the edge of a branch. One breath too strong and it could shatter. One gentle touch and it could hold. Before any of us could speak again, a news segment cut sharply on the television. Developing now, a reporter said urgently, "Sources confirm that MedPredict leadership is preparing an official statement regarding the founder's identity. Investors and healthcare executives nationwide await clarification following tonight's unprecedented reveal." Dad blinked. "Investors, executives, tonight." Lauren looked at me. "Emily, is this real? Like, your company needs you right now?" I nodded slowly. "Yes." Mom stood quickly, panic rising. "You have to speak to them. They need to know you're okay." I shook my head. "That's not how it works. Before anything goes public, I need to coordinate with my team. With PR, with legal. This isn't just a family situation, it's a national one." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "National," Lauren whispered. "You're really that important?" "I'm important to the work," I corrected gently. "Not to the spectacle." Dad frowned at the TV. What happens if you don't respond quickly? The markets move, I said. Partnerships shake, people speculate. And your team? He asked quietly. They'll be overwhelmed until I stabilize things. Mom stepped closer. Emily, you don't have to handle all of this alone. I gave her a small, tired smile. I've handled it alone for 3 years. Lauren looked at me, really looked at me. Is that what being brilliant feels like? No, I said, honestly. That's what being underestimated feels like. The clock struck midnight. Christmas morning. Not one of us moved. Then Dad stood bracing his hands on his knees. Okay, he said softly. Tell us what you need from us right now, whatever it is. Mom nodded. Anything, truly, anything. Lauren stepped beside them. We're here. We're finally here. I stared at the 3 of them, finally unified in something other than doubt. And for the first time tonight, I felt the very beginning of something tender. Something I hadn't felt from them in a long time. Belief. Dad waited for me to answer his question what I needed from them, but for a long moment I didn't know how to respond. Not because I lacked words, but because the weight of everything finally began settling inside my ribs. The noise outside had quieted to a low murmur. The world beyond our windows buzzed with speculation, camera flashes, and heated discussions about my identity, my work, my future. In here, though, the air felt strangely intimate, like we were caught in the stillness between 2 storms. I need to call my team, I finally said. I need them to know I'm okay. Mom nodded immediately. Of course, use the kitchen, we'll give you space. But I shook my head. No, stay. You need to hear this too. Lauren moved closer to Dad, uncertainty flickering across her face. She was used to conference calls, status updates, client meetings, but this was something different. This was the inside of the world she never bothered to imagine I belonged to. I stepped toward the counter and pulled my phone from my pocket. Notifications flooded the screen, missed calls, messages, Slack alerts, emergency emails from PR, and a dozen texts from investors asking for a statement. My COO Lisa had sent 7 urgent messages. Call ASAP. CNN is doubling down. WSJ wants an official quote. We need a strategy. Where are you? I hit the call button. It connected instantly. Emily. Her voice shook with relief and panic all at once. Are you safe? I'm fine, I said. I'm at my parents' house. Oh, thank God. We've been trying to reach you for hours. Everything's exploding. The servers are getting hit with a huge spike. Twitter's losing its mind. Investors want a response. The board is meeting unofficially in the morning. This reveal changes everything. I know, I said quietly. Dad straightened at the seriousness in my tone. Mom clutched the back of the chair. Lauren looked between us like she was watching a foreign film without subtitles. Lisa continued, We need to finalize a statement tonight, and we've drafted options for a press appearance. But first we need you to decide how public you're willing to be. She paused. Because after CNN's coverage, you may not get to stay private anymore. I paced slowly, feeling all 3 of them watching me. Lisa, I said we'll do a press conference tomorrow morning. Short, controlled, 5 questions. No exclusives. 5, she echoed, disbelief sputtering through the phone. That's okay. Yes, we can work with that. But investors will want more. They can wait, I said, and the board. They definitely can wait. I heard her exhale. You sound calm. I looked at my family, still frightened, still unsure, but present in a way they hadn't been in years. I'm calm, I said softly, because I'm finally not hiding. There was a long pause on her end. All right, she said. Send me your exact travel time. And text me when you're leaving town. I'll coordinate security and prepare the team. Good, I said. Thank you, Lisa, Emily, she added gently. I'm proud of you. I know this isn't what you wanted, but you built something extraordinary. My chest tightened. We built it, I said. This isn't just me. She laughed quietly. Humility, even when trending worldwide. Now go do what you need to do. I'll be here. I hung up. The silence afterward was thick again, but different than before. Less accusatory. More reverent. Dad cleared his throat. "You sound like a CEO." His voice held a strange mix of awe and sorrow. "I am a CEO," I reminded him gently. "I know," he said. "But hearing it, watching it, it makes it real." Lauren stepped forward. "You make huge decisions like that every day, yes. And you're good at it." I tilted my head. Would the country be in a panic right now if I wasn't? Her lips parted in surprise. She didn't argue. Mom approached me slowly. "So, tomorrow morning you'll be speaking to the entire nation, yes." She reached up and touched my arm tentatively, as if afraid I might fade away. "Will you be safe?" She whispered the question like a prayer. "I'll have security," I said. "We've used third-party specialists before. This won't be any different." Dad frowned. "But you'll be in front of cameras, reporters, people who just..." He faltered. "People who didn't know you were you." I met his eyes. "Dad, no one has ever really known who I am." Lauren inhaled sharply at that. Mom's eyes filled again. "We should have known." "You could have," I replied gently, "but you didn't want to see past who I used to be." That truth landed heavily, but no one ran from it this time. Dad stepped closer. "Emily," he said quietly, "I can't pretend to understand your world. Not the tech, not the investment stuff, not any of it." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "But I understand this. You are stronger than I ever realized. And smarter, and braver, and I didn't tell you that enough." My throat tightened. Lauren looked down at her hands. "I didn't tell you that at all," Mom whispered. "We thought we were protecting you, but we were just protecting our own comfort." I closed my eyes. "I know." Dad squeezed my shoulder once. "Is there anything we can do for you tomorrow?" I hesitated. "You can let me go without guilt." "I need to fly back tonight or early morning," Mom's breath stuttered. "Tonight? But it's Christmas." "Christmas changed," I said softly. Lauren nodded sadly. "It changed the second CNN said your name." Dad sank back into his chair. "Will you come back after the storm settles?" "Yes," I said instantly. "But on different terms." Mom wiped her tears. "Different how terms?" "Where you see me," I said. "Not a version you're comfortable with. Not a daughter you compare or correct." "Me." She nodded slowly, reverently. "We'll learn," Lauren whispered. "We'll try. Really try." Dad nodded. "We'll earn it." The house fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt like fertile ground, like something new might grow here if we were careful. Then, Mom said softly, almost shyly, "Would you sit with us just for a little while before you leave?" I considered it. For a moment the instinct to resist rose, the old ache that told me I didn't belong on that couch anymore, that I was too grown, too changed, too distant to fit into their familiar spaces. But then Lauren shifted aside, making room for me between her and Mom. Dad leaned forward, hope warming his expression. Mom tapped the seat with gentle fingertips, and I surprised myself by sitting. For a moment we didn't speak. We just breathed together in the glow of the tree lights and the chaos of the night, all of us trying to understand this new version of our family. Lauren broke the quiet first. "Emily," she said softly, "what's your life actually like? What do you do all day?" Her curiosity wasn't judgment this time. It was real fragile interest. I smiled faintly. "Do you want the honest answer or the impressive one?" "Both," she said. So I began talking, not like a CEO giving a press briefing and not like a daughter defending herself, but like a woman finally able to speak freely in her own home. I told them about the first prototype, the first failure, the second failure, the breakthrough moment at 2 a.m. in my tiny apartment where the predictive model finally ran without crashing. The investors who laughed, the hospital that said yes, the algorithms that began saving lives, the quiet pride, the crushing doubts, the responsibility. I told them everything they had never asked about. At some point, Mom rested her hand lightly over mine. Dad listened with his whole body. Lauren watched me with a mixture of awe and something else, something like forgiveness. Outside reporters waited in the cold. Inside my family, imperfect, frightened, flawed, finally saw me. And for the first time, I let them. The house had grown quieter by the time I stood up from the couch, though the world outside had only grown louder. Through the curtains, I could still see the silhouettes of news vans idling at the curb, their satellite dishes angled toward the sky like restless metal birds. A soft flurry of snow drifted down, catching in the beams of their headlights. Reporters moved back and forth, stamping their feet against the cold, waiting for any sign of movement from inside. Mom watched me carefully as I slipped my phone into my coat pocket. "Do you really have to go tonight?" she asked, her voice thin and trembling. "Yes," I said gently. "The team needs me." Dad nodded slowly. "We figured. We just hoped we'd have more time." Lauren moved closer, arms crossed, but not defensively this time, more like she was hugging herself against her own uncertainty. "Can't someone else handle the chaos?" she asked. "Don't you have a second in command? Someone who can shield you from all this?" "They can help," I said. "But they can't replace me." Lauren studied me with a mixture of awe and hesitation. "You really are the center of all this. I'm one part of it," I corrected, "but an important part." Mom stepped forward as if drawn by an invisible thread. "Before you go," she whispered, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." I turned toward her. "Okay." She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, come closer." I stepped nearer until she could reach me without stretching. She took my hand gently, her thumb brushing across my knuckles like she was memorizing the shape of someone she'd known all her life, but only truly seen tonight. "Are you happy?" she asked. The question landed inside me like a stone dropped into deep water, quiet, heavy, impossible to ignore. I thought about my team, about the nights spent debugging code until dawn, about the heartbreak of early failures, the exhilaration of breakthroughs, the weight of responsibility, the pride of saving lives I'd never meet, the loneliness of building something most people couldn't understand, the anonymity I once clung to like armor, the sudden exposure that ripped it away. I thought about all of it, every conflicting emotion woven into the person I had become, and I answered honestly. "I'm fulfilled," I said. Which isn't always the same as happy, but it means something deeper, something I wouldn't trade. Mom swallowed hard. "And are you safe with all this attention?" "For now," I said, "but tomorrow will be complicated." Lauren let out a long sigh. "So after you leave tonight, what happens? Investors call, surgeons email you, politicians text. I mean, what does life look like for someone whose face is suddenly everywhere?" I hesitated, then gave her the truth. "Tomorrow morning, I'll meet with the team. We'll finalize a statement. Then I'll stand in front of dozens of cameras and tell the world a version of the story that's safe for them to hear. After that, the stock will move. Hospitals will call. Reporters will speculate. And for a while, everything will be chaos." Lauren's eyes widened. "That sounds awful." "It's not awful," I said softly. "It's just public." "And you prefer private," she murmured. "Yes." Dad scratched the side of his jaw. "Then this publicity is unwelcome?" I nodded. "Very." Mom squeezed my hand. "But you'll get through it." "Yes," I said, "because I have to." The living room fell quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. The Christmas tree lights blinked steadily beside us, warm, small reminders of a holiday that had transformed into something unrecognizable. Dad stood suddenly. "Come with me." I followed him to the corner of the living room, where a tall wooden cabinet stood with double glass doors. Inside were books, framed photos, and keepsakes spanning decades. He opened the doors and reached up to the highest shelf where a thin, dusty box lay tucked between old yearbooks. He brought it down slowly, carefully, like it contained something fragile. "I've been saving this," he said quietly. "I meant to give it to you years ago. But I didn't think you'd want it." He handed me the box. Inside was a notebook worn soft-backed, filled with my handwriting from middle school, pages and pages of my earliest algorithm sketches, pattern diagrams, notes about ideas I didn't yet know would shape the rest of my life. "I found it when we cleaned out your room," Dad said. "I kept it because I thought it was special, even if I didn't understand half the squiggles in there." My breath caught. Dad. He met my eyes, guilt and pride warring in his expression. "I didn't tell you I kept it because it didn't fit the story I told myself about you. The one where you were confused, lost, searching." His voice cracked. "But the truth is, this notebook scared me, because I realized even back then you were headed somewhere I couldn't follow, somewhere bigger. And instead of supporting you, I tried to hold you down, to keep you close to the ground where I understood you." Emotion tightened my chest. "Dad, I was wrong," he whispered. "I was wrong in ways I'll regret for the rest of my life." Before I could reply, Mom wrapped her arms around him from the side, and Lauren stepped closer, placing her hand on his shoulder. I held the notebook, feeling its weight, feeling the years I spent trying to convince them who I was, only to discover they'd seen glimpses all along and turned away. I closed the box gently and tucked it under my arm. "Thank you," I said softly. Dad nodded. "It belongs with you." The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed one soft note, another hour passing, another shift in our little universe. I checked my phone. "I need to start packing," I said. Mom inhaled sharply. "Packing." "You weren't planning to stay the night I shouldn't," I said. "The longer I wait, the harder tomorrow becomes." Lauren stepped forward. "Can I stay with you while you pack?" I nodded. "Of course." We climbed the stairs together. Each step felt like walking through a memory of childhood. The squeak on the 7th stair, the family photos lining the wall, Lauren's trophies, Dad's fishing trips, Mom's garden snapshots, none with me. Lauren noticed my eyes linger. "We should add new ones," she said quietly. "Ones that include you." "We can," I said. My old bedroom was exactly as I left it, plain soft lavender walls. A desk too small for the developer, I'd become a bookshelf filled with novels I reread when the world felt too tight. Lauren helped me pull my duffel bag from under the bed. "Emily," she said gently, "can I ask you something without you getting upset?" I raised an eyebrow. "You can try." She hesitated. "When all this calms down, when you're back to your life, will you still want us in it? Or was this the last Christmas we'll spend together?" The vulnerability in her voice surprised me. I zipped the duffel halfway. "Lauren," I said softly, "tonight didn't break us." She blinked. "It didn't." "No," I said, "tonight exposed us, and exposure is painful. But it's also honest." Her breath shook. "So you'll come back, I will," I said. "But when I do, I need a family that sees me, not a family that assumes things about me." She nodded slowly, wiping a tear. "We'll try, I promise." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Trying is enough right now." We went back downstairs. Dad stood by the front door with his coat on, though he wasn't going anywhere. Mom held out a thermos hot tea she'd prepared while we were upstairs. For the drive, she whispered. I took it carefully. "Thank you." Dad cleared his throat. "We'll walk you to the car." "Dad, you don't have to step outside with all those reporters. We're not hiding," he said firmly. "Not anymore." Lauren grabbed her coat. Mom pulled on her boots. And together as a family finally beginning to stitch itself back together, we stepped toward the door. The cameras flashed as soon as it opened. Reporters surged forward. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone. For the first time, my family stood beside me, not in front of me, not behind me, but beside me. And that more than any headline felt like the beginning of something real. Snow cracked softly under our boots as we stepped onto the porch, the world outside erupting in white light. Camera flashes fired like lightning. The reporters surged toward the edge of my parents' property, blocked only by the thin line Dad drew with his outstretched arm. "Stay behind the driveway," he barked, surprising even himself. "This is our home. Respect the boundary." It wasn't a command so much as a plea, but somehow it held weight. The reporters paused, murmured, recalibrated. Maybe it was the late hour, maybe it was the cold, or maybe they sensed this moment wasn't theirs to consume yet. I tightened my coat around myself. My duffel bag hung heavy at my side. Mom slipped her hand into mine just for a moment, just to let me know she was there. Lauren stood slightly behind me, chin lifted, protective in a way I'd rarely seen from her. "Ms. Carter," a reporter shouted, "can you make a statement about the leaked identity reveal? Are you flying back to Boston tonight? Is MedPredict preparing emergency communication for investors? Is it true you developed the early models alone? Do you feel betrayed by the leak? Is your family involved in your company?" Dad lifted his arms again. "Enough, not tonight." His voice cracked with something raw and newly awakened. The reporters hesitated. Snow fluttered over their jackets, sticking to the edges of their cameras. Behind them, the news vans hummed, blue lights strobing across the snowbanks. I stepped forward, not onto the sidewalk, but close enough that my breath fogged in the cold air between us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Tonight, I said, "I'm here with my family, that's all." The stillness that followed was almost reverent. Even the cameras felt quieter, as if listening. Then I added, "Tomorrow morning at 10, I'll answer your questions." A collective inhale rippled through the crowd. "That's all for now," I said, and I stepped back toward my family. Mom's eyes shone with relief. Dad's shoulders dropped. Lauren let out a breath she'd been holding for minutes. The reporters didn't push further. Maybe they respected the boundary. Maybe they sensed something sacred in the night air. Or maybe exhaustion dulled their ambition. But they stayed back as we walked to my car. My old dented, reliable Honda Civic Frost dusting the windshield, a lonely little island in a sea of snow and television lights. It looked almost comical, considering what the world suddenly believed I was worth. Dad chuckled softly. "I guess you didn't splurge after all." I smiled. "I splurge on research servers, not cars." He nodded toward the Civic. "It suits you." Mom brushed snow from the hood. "It's humble," she said. "Like you." I opened the trunk and placed my bag inside. The cold sank into my hands, numbing my fingers. Lauren stepped beside me, arms tucked tight around herself. "Promise me something," she whispered. I turned. "What? Don't disappear." "I'm not disappearing, no," she said, shaking her head. "I mean, don't disappear into that world where we can't reach you. Don't shut us out again, even if we deserve it." Her vulnerability cracked open something deep inside me. "I won't," I said, "but I need you to meet me halfway." She nodded quickly. "We will, I will." Mom hugged me next. It wasn't the quick, polite hug she used to give. This one lingered. She tucked her face into my shoulder and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Not because the world is proud of you, but because you built something good, something that helps people." "I just wish I had seen you sooner." I wrapped my arms around her. "Thank you, Mom." Dad didn't hug me right away. He held my shoulders, studying me in the porch light. "You always were extraordinary," he said quietly. "We just weren't ready to see it." "It's okay," I said. "No," he insisted. "But it will be." Only then did he pull me into a hug, strong, awkward, emotional, in a way I had never felt from him. Snow clung to his coat. His breath fogged against the cold. And for a moment everything felt both familiar and brand new. Finally I stepped back. "Time to go," I said. Lauren nodded. Mom wiped her eyes. Dad cleared his throat. They stood together on the driveway, a family rebuilt in pieces, over one impossible night as I opened the driver's door. Before I got in, Lauren spoke again. "Emily, yeah." Her voice softened. "Come home next Christmas, even if the world's watching us again." I smiled. "I will." I slid into the car and closed the door. The thunk echoed softly inside the cabin. For a moment I just sat there, hands on the wheel, watching my breath cloud the windshield. My family stayed in my sight until I started the engine. The reporters moved aside as I backed out, their cameras raised but respectfully silent. When I rolled down the window a few inches, snowflakes drifted in. "Drive safe," Mom called. "Call us when you land," Dad shouted. Lauren cupped her hands around her mouth. "And Emily?" She hesitated. "We believe you, all of you." My chest tightened. I nodded once and drove away. The headlights cut through the snow-covered road, guiding me toward the highway, and the life waiting for me beyond Maple Ridge. The night was quiet, the sky clear except for the drifting flakes. For the first time, the anonymity I'd lost felt less like a burden and more like a shift, an invitation to step into the next version of myself. A version who wasn't hiding. A version who wasn't underestimated. A version who could finally be whole. As I merged onto the empty highway, my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "Press room secured. Team ready. We'll get through this. Proud of you." Then another message from Mom. "We love you. We're sorry. Come home safe." Another from Lauren. "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time all night, I let myself breathe fully. The world would be waiting in a few hours, curious, relentless, hungry for answers. But for this small stretch of quiet highway, in the soft glow of my dashboard lights, I allowed myself to feel something simple and rare. Hope. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful emotional storytelling. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories to life, and it means more than you know.